Hello and welcome to Kepara Healing. My name is Shishin Kwesi and I am the owner of Kepara Healing. And today I had the honor of being able to have a discussion with blood sugar specialist Queen Medina. We talked about all things gestational diabetes, what it is, factors that can contribute to it, and holistic ways that you can heal and prevent this condition. If you enjoy this video, please do not forget at the end to like and subscribe to see more videos like it. Okay, Queen. Well, I just want to say I am so excited to have you as a guest this evening. Yay! I appreciate your
Yay!
energy. I appreciate all of the very useful information that you are always sharing with the community. And I'm really excited to get this conversation started because I know that there are a lot of women, especially Black women, that are dealing with this. And there's so much information that is being thrown at us, and it's so hard for people
Mhm.
to know facts from fiction when it comes to nutrition and healthy lifestyles,
Mhm.
and the condition of gestational diabetes. So I'm really
Absolutely.
excited to have this conversation to really support people with kind of, digging through what information they don't need and really kind of get into the core of it with you this evening.
Yeah,
So
for
first,
sure.
I'm going to pause because I want to. I just want to give you the space to introduce yourself, okay, and shine some light
Yeah.
on you for a minute.
Okay, well, my name is Medina Henry. I am a certified functional and holistic nutritional therapy practitioner, and I specialize in the diabetes space. So I work with primarily people of color who are battling pre and type 2 diabetes, as well as gestational diabetes, and also the complications that come from those main lifestyle conditions. So things like high blood pressure or cholesterol issues, heart disease, different things like that. And so my entire aim is to help people to use food as medicine in order to help them to naturally balance their blood sugar, lower their A1C, and eliminate the need for diabetes medications, because this is a condition that, while it can be complicated and multifaceted, it's at the end of the day, at the root of it, it is an illness that is deeply rooted in lifestyle and nutrition choices. So my goal is to be able to help us to be able to help ourselves. And in order to do that, you have to have the knowledge, right? And you have to also know how to apply that knowledge in a way that is going to make that knowledge powerful, right? And then you
Mhm.
go from there. So it's so fitting for us to have this conversation because gestational diabetes is actually where I got started in my health journey. When I was pregnant with my son, I had gestational diabetes, and it was a whirlwind of an experience, to say the least. It was probably the scariest and lowest time in my life. And being able to, have the knowledge that I have now, where I can kind of go back to that moment and understand what I was going through now, being on the other side of it, now I can use, my expertise to be able to help other women that are in that space right now who may just be feeling overwhelmed and confused and not knowing where to start. So I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. I agree with you. It is so needed. It is so needed. It is so needed, especially in the Black community. So I honor you for just having this on your heart to do, truly.
Thank you, Queen. Thank you. Well, I want to begin with the basics. So, like you said, there's just a lot of information out there. And so, just starting with the basics, could you just share with us what is gestational diabetes first for those that may not be as aware?
Yeah, for sure. So, gestational diabetes is a condition that happens when women develop high blood sugar levels during pregnancy. And this can be really confusing because initially a woman may not notice the symptoms of it, which is really common in most cases of diabetes, whether it's during pregnancy or not. But when it comes down to a woman in her pregnancy journey, a lot of the symptoms of diabetes are just naturally blamed on the fact that you're pregnant. So it's like, oh, you're pregnant. Like, it's normal for you to feel that way. You're pregnant. You're pregnant. You're pregnant. You're growing a baby. That's normal type of thing. And it can be really difficult when that is what you're hearing the entirety of your pregnancy. So you don't really know what to take seriously and what not to. You know what I'm saying? And it can really cause you to ignore the signs or brush them off as normal when they're really, really not. But later on, as a woman goes through her pregnancy and getting all the tests done and things like that, she may notice some things are kind of off, and some of the symptoms like excessive thirst or sweating or frequent urination, these are all things and signs of blood sugar dysregulation. But it's not until we go for our 5-month checkup when we have to drink this sugary drink that we are noticing, oh yeah, something's wrong, you know what I mean, when we could have kind of paid attention to the signs earlier on to get ahead of it. Because at that point, there's so much going on emotionally during pregnancy that this is just kind of like, oh my gosh, now I'm dealing with something else on top of all these hormonal changes and this shifting body and all of this kind of stuff. So, in a nutshell, that's what gestational diabetes is. It's just having the symptom of high blood sugar levels during pregnancy.
Yes, and I know that can be very frightening. Like you said, there's already so much
Mhm.
that a woman has to deal with during pregnancy,
Mhm.
hormones and body changing and preparing for baby,
Yeah.
um, and that does just add one more thing. So, what are some factors that can contribute to gestational diabetes?
I think that there's a lot. There's an entire list of things, right? But um, there are, gosh, the most important things that I want to kind of speak on right now that I think are kind of like the most pressing things is number one, the fact that we're seeing a monumental rise in cases of prediabetes. In fact, over 85% of people with prediabetes don't know that they have it. And so when you have someone with a history of diabetes, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, that gets pregnant, that's going to increase her risk of having gestational diabetes during pregnancy, right? So that's the number one thing that I want to speak on because this is really a large and sort of rude awakening that we're seeing within the Black and Brown community and amongst all people of color is that we're not getting tested enough before we get pregnant, so that we can prepare our bodies for pregnancy. And I'm sure that we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's so important before you get pregnant to actually know what's going on with your body so that you can kind of foresee or prevent some of these things that can happen during pregnancy. So that's number one is having a history of, blood sugar dysregulation that you're either aware of or not. Secondly, a huge part of the development of gestational diabetes comes from the fact that the placenta, which is what helps to nourish and provide all the nutrients to the fetus, it also produces its own hormones, such as cortisol and progesterone, and even something called human placental lactogen. So, when a woman continues on the journey of pregnancy and these hormone levels rise, they can actually counteract against insulin. And insulin is the hormone that's responsible for regulating glucose levels and keeping them in a healthy range. So, because there's this blockage happening, and then you have a woman who may have already had a history of insulin resistance, right? Glucose levels are staying elevated for longer than they should. And what ends up happening is that can affect the growth of the fetus. And it also puts the baby at risk after birth because once that baby is born and detached from the umbilical cord, it's having to survive off of its own hormone levels. And in some cases, the baby's blood sugar can actually drop too low after delivery because it's no longer receiving these excess amounts of glucose that their little bodies are still producing excess amounts of insulin because that is what was needed in the womb. You know what I'm saying? So there is a whole kind of roller coaster of hormones at play here, when it comes to the development of gestational diabetes. And I think that's where most people get lost, is they're not really understanding where that comes from. They're not understanding that blockage that, hey, yeah, you're carrying a baby and you're dealing with your own hormonal changes on top of that, but also the hormones that are being released from the placenta are going to affect your hormones and the baby's hormones.
Mhm.
So there's a lot at play here as well.
Right. And so just as you were sharing that, something came up for me. So you said that, so how often would you recommend? So if a woman is, let's say she's planning to get pregnant, how often would you recommend she
Mhm.
test her blood sugar levels?
So depending on when she's planning to get pregnant, and it's crazy because I don't think any woman really knows, like, you
When it's
know,
gonna, right.
when they're going to get pregnant, right? It's always
Right.
it's always like, okay, I have a desire to be a mother, and we're going to start practicing, so to speak. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so as far as blood work and different things like that, when you have this idea in your mind of, I want to start trying for a baby, I always say, maybe a year in advance is going to be a really good window for you to get your body in a healthy state
Hmm.
in order to be able to carry a baby, because you don't only want to get pregnant, you want to be able to carry the baby to term as well. And in order to do that, you have to have a healthy body at the end of the day. And so I feel like if you're in that position where you're like, okay, I want to start trying for a baby when I'm 25 or I'm 27 or whatever it is for you, then maybe that year in advance, just start saying, okay, let me start making sure that I get my blood work done. Let me see what's going on with me first. So that way I can be healthy and feel good in my body, not just in preparation for the pregnancy, but also after the pregnancy as well, right? Because it matters how well you're taking care of yourself both before and after.
Right, right. And in the depending on your lifestyles, that determines the cells that support
Exactly.
building this beautiful little being inside your body,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they say
Mm-hmm.
that so much of what happens when a baby is developing inside a mama can determine their health so many decades after they're born. And so
Mm-hmm.
yes. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so what could be some healing habits that mom could incorporate to prevent or heal from the condition of gestational diabetes? What would you say are some of like the really, I know there are many,
So,
but
yeah, there's definitely many. There's definitely a lot. But
yeah.
I think for this particular question, one thing that I can't stress enough, and no pun intended, is stress management, right? Like, I don't think that we as women in general, or as a society, I don't think we really take into consideration what is happening and what a woman's body goes through during pregnancy. It is not something to take lightly. It is not just, oh, I'm going through every day and my stomach's getting bigger. Like, there's so many things that are happening on a cellular level
Mhm.
that can drastically affect how the course of that pregnancy ends up. And when you're dealing with hormones like cortisol, which is the stress hormone, knowing that that's naturally going to be elevated because you're carrying a fetus, it makes it even more important that in your everyday life, you are paying attention to different things that are triggering you, or the thoughts that are going through your mind, or some of the relationships that you're having, or being able to have the confidence to ask for help when you need it, or things like meditation and journaling are great, because sometimes you have, this was my personal testimony, was, during pregnancy, you do feel isolated, so to speak. And so having somewhere where you can at least put your thoughts, like in a journal or something like that, that's very simple, but it's a very powerful tool, because you feel like you're not keeping everything in and you're able to get it out. And being able to express yourself, especially during pregnancy, is going to be really, really important. Super, super important. But just self-care in and of itself, but things that are particularly targeted towards stress management, whether that's physical activity, going outside, going for walks, practicing yoga, or whatever makes you feel good as a woman, those are not habits that you want to just let go because you're pregnant. And that happens very, very often. It's like now, I'm with child, I can't do yoga, I can't lift weights, I can't do this and I can't do that because we're trying to be so careful, not realizing how much of an impact that has on your pregnancy journey. So that's number one, is anything that is going to help you manage stress and feel good in your skin and in your body as a pregnant woman, especially as you start to see your body change. That is going to be key. That's key. Number one. Number one.
Yes, yes.
You
I
know.
love that. I'm getting goosebumps because I'm all about self-care.
Absolutely. And that's not to dismiss other like healthcare practices. Like, yeah, you want to make sure you're getting enough sleep or enough rest throughout the day. You want to make sure that you're eating healthy. You want to make sure that you're doing all of these other things. But I think when it comes to self-care, that's so easily put on the back burner
Mhm.
because when you become pregnant, especially in the Black community, like I feel like we have been raised a lot of times with this sort of preconceived notion that like once you get pregnant, your life is over and your needs don't matter and it's all about the baby. And so we really, really hold on to that once we become pregnant. It's not even after the baby's here. It's once we find out that we're pregnant, everything that we need, it just like goes away. And it's like baby, 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 you know?
Right, right.
That's hard. That's hard.
Yes. And I feel like self-care in and of itself is this umbrella that sleep
Mhm.
falls under, good nutrition falls under, because those are ways of caring for
Mhm.
ourselves, right?
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Yes. And I know for us as Black women, I mean, there are the obvious stressors that we may have in our lives, like relationships and job.
Mhm.
But I also feel like I feel the stress in my body sometimes just when I'm scrolling through social media
Oh,
and
a
hear about
thousand
another
percent.
Black man being
Whew.
shot, or like all of the
Mhm.
all of the injustices that we're faced with. And I
Mhm.
can feel like that trauma being internalized,
Yeah.
and we don't even know that we're taking it into our body and kind of stashing it and stuffing it somewhere in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So yes,
I speak often about the fact that as people of color, for one, I don't think that a lot of us have been taught to understand the way that our body speaks. And I also think that on the opposite end of that, not really the opposite, but also in addition to that, as we get older and we go through life, we also forget how to take care of ourselves in and of itself. You know what I mean? And we have to also realize that our body is always speaking to us. It's always speaking to us, but it's very common for us to, take certain symptoms and say, oh, that's normal. My mom dealt with that, my grandma dealt with that. It's just like it runs in the family. Like we're so comfortable brushing things off as normal. And what I always tell people is like just because something is common does not make it normal. And there's a big difference between those two things. And it's not until we start connecting with our bodies and we start connecting with our thoughts and we start paying attention to how our body is trying to get our attention. And hopefully we take heed to that voice so we can change what we're doing in order to allow that symptom to, diminish. So it's very much so time for us to get back to the basics of connecting with our bodies
Mhm.
and really listening to our bodies when it whispers so we don't have to hear it scream, you know? So
Yes.
it's it's a powerful thing. And I think that the world that we live in right now, I think that there's a large majority of us that are wanting this knowledge, right? That are wanting to wake up to the natural way of doing things or really desire to be healthy and want this information. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yes. And the world and the way that it's running right now, it's not really made for us to have the space, because you have to have the practices, the daily practices, to have the space to slow
Mm-hmm.
down and to
Mm-hmm.
be present, to be able to hear those little cues. Because a lot of times
Absolutely.
we're just running so much that unless it's a jarring pain or it's really yelling,
Mm-hmm.
we don't always feel it. And so getting into those spaces, because I know for me, I'm like, the minute I feel something, It could be, I'm like, oh, what's that? Like, I know my body's trying to tell. And, it could be, as simple as just like a little, it doesn't have, you want to catch it before it becomes this debilitating
Absolutely.
pain. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think
Mm-hmm.
having the practices and the healing habits that support you with just being in reflection and
Mm-hmm.
with your body can
Mm-hmm.
really support with catching things early.
For sure. For
But
sure.
I want to, so that was really all I wanted to add. But is there anything else that you would like to close up with?
Well, I kind of just wanted to piggyback off of what you just said about the way that the world has run that keeps us so busy where we don't have time to slow down and connect with ourselves and realize when our bodies are speaking to us. I think that it is because that's a lot of people's reality is they're going from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. And when they look back over their day, they never had time to fill their own cup. And I think what's important for a lot of people to realize is that when we think of filling our own cup, sometimes our mind can automatically go to, okay, I need to take a long extended vacation and I need to, call out of work and I need to, separate myself from whatever. And sometimes that is necessary. I am not going to downplay the importance of that. Sometimes you definitely need that. But if you find that you're in a situation or in a space where that's not doable for you right now, I think there's so much value in us realizing that it doesn't have to take very long for us to get ourselves in a space of zen or peace or where we feel like we have released a burden, right? And sometimes that may look like getting up 20 minutes before your household just to appreciate the silence, just to
Mhm.
have enough space to just hear your own thoughts and recognize the things that are kind of that you're habitually thinking or that you're habitually feeling that maybe you haven't noticed before, right? So it doesn't have to be this, long drawn out, like I'm going to do all of this woo stuff. Sometimes it is just taking 20 minutes or 30 minutes to put your phone away or turn the TV off or, put work away or whatever distractions that you normally have and just be present. Just be present and just sit there for a while. And I think that it's really sad that we exist in a society where we don't feel like we even have that time, you know? And a lot of times we don't even know what that looks like. And then on the opposite end of that, for example, I had a client and I usually give my clients what are called actionable victories. And it's just small actionable goals that they'll focus on before our next visit. And I told this young lady, I said, your actionable victory for this week is just to sit down for 5 minutes and do nothing. And it was really sad because in response to that, she almost had a panic attack at the thought of sitting down and doing nothing. And it really opened my eyes to see that that's how a lot of us, especially as Black women, function. We don't feel like we are of value or we are good enough unless we are, giving of ourselves and running ourselves dry. And for a lot of us to just sit down for 5 minutes for that to cause anxiety because you're not being productive, it shows that we have a long way to go for one, but it shows also the opportunity that we have to reach people that really need this.
Mhm.
So that's pretty much all that I wanted to say in response to that. And I know I can talk forever. I can talk forever, but I'm really, really passionate about this topic and it's so needed. It is so needed.
Mhm.
Gosh, it's so needed. I'm gonna stop talking. So
Well, I 100% agree with you. I think self-care is so crucial for us as Black women. And I
Mhm.
think it's time for us to begin, just to kind of piggyback off what you just said, to begin reframing what we see
Mhm.
productivity to be.
Yeah,
Because I think we are
absolutely.
we are definitely being productive, just being able to sit and connect to our breath for 5 minutes. Like that does
Mhm.
so, and I think it does so much for the central nervous system, and we don't always know
Yes.
that, but you begin to feel
Yeah,
it when it becomes a daily practice.
for
Well, I
sure.
just want to say thank you so much, Queen Medina, for offering your time this
Of
evening. You
course.
have dropped so many gems, and I
Thank you.
appreciate the work that you do for us. And hopefully, I'll have an opportunity to connect with you again here in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you, Queen.